Mothers and families at this age, we have a big impact in the community in changing health for the better. This is life-saving work that we do. This is the work that you are a part of, Community Christian Church. Your support, your generosity to Withered Compassion, the jazz festival that you do every Christmas for the last many years, have helped communities such as this one to be able to receive full life, for family and children to be able to live fully. And we do this work not by ourselves. We do this work with partners. We do this work with you. We do this work with other faith-based organizations. We come together. We work ecumenically to try to figure out how to help communities be sustainable, from feeding infants at a young age to helping family plant food that are rich in nutrition and vitamins so that everyone can get the things that they need. We work from the beginning to the planting, to the feeding, to livelihood. In the Gospel from Mark today, it talks about a farmer scattering seeds in different areas. The seeds are good news and gifts from God. The seeds of new life, the seed of resurrection, that's what the seeds are. The seeds are the good news that the farmer is scattering in different fields. We receive this gift, and we are to share the gifts and scatter them to create a just world for all of God's children, to work towards the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven. And as a church, as a faith community that we gather here, we are called to work and to scatter compassion and love and justice in places that need them most. And in this village, in Sorority's home, in Kampong Thom, is one of many communities where our church have been scattering seeds of compassion, of new life, of hope and dreams, so that the next generation can be healthy and fully plant their roots and blossom. The parable today tells us of the farmer scattering seeds in various areas, and the seeds, they do not grow in all of those areas. In one area, the birds would come and would eat the seeds. In another area, the seeds would grow too quickly and didn't root deeply into the soil and would get destroyed by the hot sun. All of this condition were not good, and the environment, the soil could not fully receive the seeds to let the seed fully grow. But we hear in the text that there was one area where the farmer scattered the seed, and the seed took roots and multiplied by 30, 60, enough to feed the family. The farmer in the text, when he scatters the seeds, he doesn't know how the seeds will return. He doesn't know which area will be good. So as the farmer scatters the seeds, all he can do is hope that they will fall in the place that will allow the seeds to grow. In all the various soils, because the soil in the area, all the places that he scattered, they look very similar, and he is unable to tell the difference. But when the seeds fall in one area, the soil took in the seeds, and they fully grow. This environment in the soil was yearning for the seed and for the gift that the farmer has to offer of hope, of resurrection, and took the seeds in. The soil took the seeds in and fully accepted it and let it grow. The farmer found a place that needed the seeds. The work that we do at Withered Compassion is very similar to this. Our work is going to places, going to communities where local communities are at the highest risk and are in need of help. We go to places where people don't go. We go to places where the world has turned its back on. The conditions in those areas are severe and mostly needed. Our work together is finding these communities that have been neglected, that have been forgotten, that have experienced oppression and exploitation, to find these communities and to walk with them, to rebuild together the communities. Our work is to find these communities and to be in solidarity with one another. And I'm reminded of this work in Cambodia when I was there. Cambodia is one of those places that we, the church, have scattered hope, compassion, new life. Cambodia has a very dark history in the last 50 years. Towards the end of my visit, I returned to the capital in Phnom Penh, and we had extra time before flying out. We decided to drive 20 miles to visit another village, another field. This field is now a museum. It is the killing fields to remember the million of Cambodians who were killed during Pol Pot's time in the 1970s. In the 3 years that Pol Pot ruled Cambodia, about as high as 3 million people were killed. The total population of Cambodia during that time was 8 million. So that was close to 40% of the entire population being wiped out. And this museum is to serve as a reminder to the rest of the world to not forget what happened back then. And when Pol Pot and his government fell and they ran into hiding, much of Cambodia and its infrastructure was destroyed, was gone. The hospital, the clinics, the transportation system, water was all gone. And Cambodia needed help to be rebuilt. And again, you have to remember during this time in the 1970s, a lot was going on in Southeast Asia. There was conflict in Laos and a war going on in Vietnam. Southeast Asia was a hot spot. People were dying. Millions of people were fleeing. Millions of Southeast Asians fleeing, crossing the ocean to find safety. And during this time, my family, we were one of the ones trying to flee. My dad worked for the United States Army during this time as a translator, and he had to flee, and he took me with him, along with millions of other refugees along the way. But when the new government in Cambodia took over the country, they couldn't rebuild by themselves. And other countries nearby, Vietnam and Laos, couldn't help much because of their own conflict. And Cambodia was still too dangerous. And the United Nations did not recognize the new government of Cambodia. They only recognized Pol Pot and his regime. And so the United Nations and other foreign governments did not want to have to do anything with Cambodia. And so governments turned their backs on Cambodia. People were saying how dangerous it was, and it was dangerous. But not everyone turned their back on Cambodia. One of the very first communities that did not acted as if it was business as usual and decided to ignore all the dangers and what was happening and enter Cambodia was the church. Our church, our partner, Church World Service, went in to Cambodia to help Cambodia rebuild its communities, its education system, its schools, to help the people rebuild their lives. When the world was telling everyone to go in a different direction, to not focus on Cambodia because it was too dangerous, the church did it differently. The church took it on and went into Cambodia. Despite what everyone was saying, despite all the warnings, and Cambodia needed the work because many of its roots and soils were destroyed. And the church couldn't just move on with business as usual. The church, we stopped, we prayed, and we acted. And we turned our attention, our compassion, in figuring how to rebuild a country where its population, almost half, were wiped out. Cambodia was desperately yearning for the world to not forget its people, because its history and much of their people were in need of rebuilding. During this time, our church, together, we did not turn away from Cambodia. Instead, we turned toward the country and made it our focus to help our sisters and brothers who needed the world's help. We came in working with the organization to slowly rebuild the infrastructure, to slowly plant seeds of peace and reconciliation. And today, almost 5 decades since, Withered Compassion is still in Cambodia, working with families like Isari and her son and their children, her families where they have survived the conflict, working with people who have children now, working with new generations whose parents and grandparents were affected by the war, and slowly trying to plant new roots, to till the soil together, to build homes together, to live and be in community together, to raise the children and the next generation together. This is the seed that we, the church, are planting. Seed of hope, seed of new life, seed of compassion and justice. The work that we do as church, like the farmer scattering the seeds in the gospel, is scattering hope and solidarity in places that we don't know about, in places that are not on the maps, in places where the world have moved on and do not recognize. With compassion, we find communities that have been ignored by the world and are mostly vulnerable, and work and be in relationship with. When the world is hurting, we respond. We don't act as if it was business as usual. We respond because our faith calls us to respond. When a community is hurting because of a disaster or because of violence caused by human or by disaster, by natural disaster, or because of disease, when our sisters and brothers here or far away are hurting, the church respond. The church respond. We find and go into communities where most people would not go. We go to places where it is difficult and challenging to get to. And when we go, we plant roots and we stay. We stay for a long time. We stay in Cambodia. We stay in places in South America, Central America, places all over the world. We stay because we are a church called to respond. When injustice exists in our community or in communities far away, when communities have been forgotten, we respond. We scatter seeds of hope in the midst of despair. We scatter seeds of peace in the midst of violence and injustice. We scatter new life in the midst of death. This is our faith. This is our work as a church when we come together, finding these communities where their hearts are yearning and needing us to be church, finding these communities so that we can be in relationship with the beloved community. Poet and writer Wendell Berry reminds us of our connection to one another, our connection through the earth, our connection in our communities, in the way we live. And he tells us, the soil is the great connector of lives, the source and destination of all. It is the healer and restorer and resurrector by which disease passes into health, age into youth, death into life. Without proper care for it, we can have no community. Because without proper care, we can have no life. We are called to care for the community in which we live and in which we are part of the human community. We are able to live fully as human beings when our sisters and brothers are able to also live fully as human beings. When our community is healthy, our neighbor community is healthy. When our neighbor's community is hurt, we are hurt. And by being church and living out our faith, we act with compassion to restore communities to its full potential. We focus on communities and in places where many have forgotten. And for the last 7 decades, withered compassion have been scattering seeds of peace and hope in places that have experienced destruction because of wars, because of famine, because of conditions that are outside of people's control, where communities are yearning for peace and hope, and many, many generations have benefited from the seeds of hope. We work with people like Isari and her children so her children can grow and be healthy. We work with Isari and her community to plant seeds to feed the community. We work with Isari to advocate for her family and her community. We work with Isari to advocate for her rights. And as a faith community, our job is very much like the farmer, sharing the good news in places that are ready and waiting to receive them, in places that are yearning for us to be church, yearning for us to act with compassion and to work for justice and to scatter justice everywhere. And for the longest time, Community Christian Church, you have been scattering hope and compassion and justice, not just here in greater Kansas City, but all over the world. Many communities have experienced your compassion. Your compassion have allowed new life, hope to blossom in many places. Many communities have blossomed with peace and working towards sustainability. This is the work that we together as church have been doing together, scattering peace, hope. Because wherever we scatter seed and hope, the return affects us. We affect the world. We are called to live in intentional community with the global community because God has given us seeds of life, and we are to share that gift. May we continue to be with communities that are vulnerable. May we continue to be with communities that are oppressed and be in solidarity today and the days to come. Thanks be to God. Amen.